Welcome back to Tech Room background material for Between the Ashes here on Paladin Gaming. We are here in the Intelligence tab of the Tech Room, and we are going to start reading intelligence entries, starting with Terrans. This is a translation of an article intended for Vasudan observers. A copy of the original may be requested from any terminal. Humanity evolved as an apex predator species on Earth, the third planet in the Sol system. With some technological assistance, these ancient humans were able to establish societies on each of Earth's major landmasses, aside from a frigid polar continent which still held temporary research settlements. Modern humans continue to leverage this adaptability, spreading to every planet in their space with an appropriate atmosphere in spite of a cultural awareness of genetic modification. However, some simple modifications to increase lifespan and remove common medical problems have become common. Human civilization developed basic spaceflight long before global unity. While some scientific missions were conducted jointly under the international, later interplanetary, aeronautical and space administration, many human nation-states also maintained their own space programs, especially for missions with an economic objective. It should not be surprising, then, that this phase of human history is rife with conflict, both political and piratical. The development of the Galactic Terran Alliance and the use of the term Terran itself is a rejection of humanity's fractious past. Humanity is as culturally and ideologically diverse as ever. Everything from religion and culture to the proper role of technology and the military is a possible ground for debate. In the ashes of the Unification War, humanity came together to form a new alliance, one in which this diversity would be embraced as a strength and where disputes would be resolved with words, not weapons. Vasudans. I think a lot of this is just copied over from Freespace, but some of this is really new. Like Ozymandias, Admiral Po, Kalev Ehin, Inadam. The Vasudan species hails from the Beta Hydri system, now called Vasuda in their honor. Well, maybe it's not. Maybe some of this is new, because I don't think Vasuda was ever named anything else in canon. They evolved on the fourth planet in the system, known as Vasuda Prime. The planet is at the inner end of the star's habitable zone, rendering it hot, arid, and hostile. Vasudan physiology evolved down radically different lines than our own, with knockoff effects on their history, culture, and psychology. Vasuda Prime's inhospitality could have led to intense competition. Instead, the Vasudan people developed a complex network of social connections and trade relations, helping make the most of the planet's resources. With the invention of spaceflight and the discovery of rich resource deposits deeper in the system, Vasudan society soon formally united under what Terrans would call a parliamentary government to ensure equitable access to this new wealth. Terran society struggles to understand Vasudans overall. The concept of a unilateral central government making decisions about resource allocation, coupled with the relative homogeneity of Vasudan culture, evokes Terran dystopic fiction. The Vasudan emphasis on history and mysticism is often seen as backwards, or at least strange. Misunderstandings such as these compromised early diplomatic efforts, prolonging the 14 Years' War by at least a decade. In all interactions with Vasudan people, it is crucial to remember that they are a distinct species, and their culture is adapted to their needs, not ours. Vasudan society has a complex hierarchy, which was at first misidentified as a caste system. It is now understood that this hierarchy comes with a high degree of social mobility, and was intentionally designed to promote extreme meritocracy. This system is supported by a complex system of honorifics baked into the Vasudan language at a low level. This language, too, was intentionally created, combining elements of many historical languages into one, in a way that makes intuitive sense to native speakers. Some Vasudans intentionally use language in a way that emphasizes features from their individual ethnic backgrounds, while others make a point of favoring as wide an assortment of it as possible. This is, apparently, something of a sensitive issue. One particular area of confusion concerns gender markers. As an adaptation to their arid environment, Vasudans, like most fauna from their world, are sequentially hermaphroditic, and most spend most of their time as male, undergoing a temporary transition for reproductive purposes. Until both species understand each other more closely, gender will be one of the many sources of mistranslation. As the only extant sapient extraterrestrial species in known space, the Vasudan species is of intense interest to Terran xenobiologists. That they would have evolved on such a hostile world while much more hospitable planets have produced nothing more complex than non-sapient xenofauna. Most mainstream... That's a sentence fragment. Most mainstream Vasudan mystical traditions assert the existence of gods from the stars, which assisted the Vasudan people in their infancy, and while these myths sound implausible by Terran standards, the discovery of alien ruins in the nearby Antares system has lent some credibility to this theory. Cross-referencing the myths with known historical events suggests this visit would have taken place roughly 8,000 years ago, the same time that the ancient civilization was losing its own conflict with the Shivans. The significance of this, if any, is a subject of fervent speculation, but so far no hard answers have emerged. Owing to Vasuda Prime's desert conditions and the incompatibility of spoken Vasudan with Terran physiology, Vasudan ships are typically assigned reporting names drawn from Egyptian mythology. Considering the Egyptian Empire's strength and long history, many Vasudans find the comparison flattering, and some even take Terran names from the same sources. Shivans. The species designated Shivans appeared without warning in 2335, attacking both Terran and Vasudan forces with a ferocity that brought a quick end to the 14 Years' War. You know what? I'm going to let this play and read it out in the window. On every level, very little is known about the Shivans. Even their name is a provisional designation, referring to a destroyer deity of in Earth's Hindu religion. Shivan ships do not mount gravity generators, and Shivan organisms are well adapted to maneuvering in zero-G, suggesting that they do not originate in a terrestrial environment. Further complicating matters are the apparently synthetic components integrated into Shivan physiology, most notably a plasma-based defensive weapon. Shivan cybernetics is bidirectional, with Shivan technology containing organic components, although the operating principles are still similar enough to be understood. The shield systems used by Terran and Vasudan fighters, for example, are derived from captured Shivan equipment. Xenobiologists know very little about Shivan society. A leading hypothesis is the hive mind theory, arguing that Shivan society is broken down in specialized functions, driven by a collective intelligence. The most convincing evidence supporting this theory is the behavior of Shivan forces following the destruction of the Lucifer, the turning point of the Shivan Incursion. Other experts caution against attributing insectoid properties to the Shivans, regardless of their appearance and behavior. Shivan communication appears to occur in the electromagnetic spectrum, though efforts to decode their transmissions have yielded no meaningful results to date. Alien artifacts discovered on Altair 4 suggest that neither Terran nor Vasudan society were the first victims of Shivan aggression. A species designated the Ancients were attacked by a Shivan fleet and unable to repel it, largely owing to their inability to pierce Shivan shield systems. It is unknown how old the Shivans truly are, nor how many civilizations they have destroyed. Man. The Shivan animations are just freaky. Subspace. Talks about the Ancients a lot, but there doesn't seem to be an intel entry for them. The existence of subspace was first suggested in the mid-21st century to account for surprising experimental results by the Ataraxis 1 and 2 deep space probes. By the end of the century, the fringe theory had become accepted science with proven applications in transportation, communication, and power generation, although the last only in extremely small scales. By far the most well-known application of subspace is as the medium of travel for jump drives. Two types of subspace jumps are possible. The more common type are intra-system jumps, which create a temporary tunnel through subspace between 2 points within a system. Intra-system jumps are affected by both distance and gravity, so getting to a specific destination may require jumping to one or more intermediate locations. These navigational adjustment points are a common site of pirate activity, and both governmental and private security forces spend considerable time and effort protecting them. Jumps between systems are different. Generating a subspace tunnel without the assistance of a star's gravity is beyond current science, so ships must make use of naturally occurring intersystem jump nodes. The process is fundamentally the same, however the drive must be specifically reinforced or resonance from the jump node will tear it apart. This is standard practice on ships of transport scale and above. Excuse me. Until the Shivan Incursion, however, miniaturizing this technology to fighter scale was prohibitively expensive. It was typically reserved for special operations squadrons, although ships on intelligence gathering missions sometimes had their escape pods fitted with them as well. Collaboration with Vasudan teams has reduced the cost of small-scale intersystem drives, and they are becoming standard equipment for Alliance fighters and bombers. Intersystem jump nodes vary considerably in stability and throughput. Most nodes exhibit some form of instability. This typically manifests as shifting, where the jump node moves intermittently to a new position in the system, and phasing, where the node becomes inaccessible for a time but later returns. These forms of instability are considered acceptable and are relatively well understood. A much more serious problem comes in the form of node collapse. While theoretically possible, this phenomenon has never been observed to happen naturally. However, node collapse was accidentally induced during the destruction of the SD Lucifer during its jump to Sol, severing the system from the rest of the galaxy. Subspace has several unusual tactical implications. There are many possible subspace paths between any 2 points in space, and specialized equipment is needed to accurately track a vessel. Subspace ambushes, while technically possible, are very rare due to the need to cover all possible paths, although specialized jump drives which can quickly move through the subspace barrier have been proposed. Shield systems, both the Shivan originals nor our reproductions, do not function in subspace, which was a key factor in the destruction of the Shivan Lucifer. Convergence Engine. A convergence engine is an obsolete precursor to a jump drive, popular in Sol shortly before the outbreak of the Unification War. Like a jump drive, a convergence engine allows for faster-than-light travel, although its manner of operation is entirely different. Where a jump drive opens a discrete subspace tunnel for the ship to travel down, a convergence engine temporarily dissolves the subspace barrier, causing the ship to enter a strange state where it is governed by subspace physics, while partially existing in real space as well. While this state is of considerable scientific interest, it has extremely limited practical applications for the simple reason that the engine must remain active during the entire jump, dramatically increasing power requirements over distance. An uncontrolled shutdown of a convergence engine has been described as by one researcher as a highly efficient way to convert a ship and crew into exciting new forms of physics. A convergence engine can be more efficient than a jump drive over very short distances, but given the safety risks, the cost of installing and maintaining 2 separate FTL systems, and the very modest gains offered even in the ideal circumstances, mean convergence engines have been largely relegated to a research tool and occasional holonovel special effect. Sorry, I was just reading and not watching the animation. La-di-da, I want to see the ship jumping out. I want to see the ship jumping with the thing, though. ISA Fadian. So it's a grainy. Alright, Inadam. Is this the same as in the Project Inadam was a product of GTI Research and Development. Yeah, it's exactly the same. We're not going to read that again. Galactic Terran Alliance. That is the same, isn't it? Yeah, it's the same as the one in the faction video. So is the Parliamentary Vasudans Empire. That's the same wording. The Antares Federation Movement, which will be distinct from the Antares Federation, which we already read. The Antares Federation is a proposal for a populist, decentralized, independent government centered in the Antares system. Taking inspiration from similar structures in Terran history, the Antares Federation would treat each of its member worlds and habitats as equal partners. This is just the same in a future tense. Equal partners entitled to a considerable autonomy, a central parliamentary-style government would provide a framework for them to cooperate on the crime and social problems plaguing Antares. Noted political theorist Diana Patil worked with the then-nascent Antares Federation movement to draw up a proposed constitution, which includes a carefully chosen system of checks and balances to ensure no member, including the central authority, can come to wield too much power. While the goals of the Antares Federation movement are laudable, its means are less so. Proponents argue for total secession from the Galactic Terran Alliance with no consideration to less dramatic reform, and have repeatedly asserted a readiness for armed uprising should it become necessary. Worryingly, the Antares militia and several of the larger private security companies are sympathetic to the federal cause. A number of attacks against Alliance officials have been undertaken in the Federation's name, and while representatives of the movement have denied involvement, they have also refrained from condemning the attacks, calling them a natural consequence of an intolerable system. That sounds familiar, but I'm not going to get into it. The Antares Federation movement has a complicated relationship with the broader Antares for Antarians movement, or AFA. While the two groups have generally aligned goals, the AFA is far more willing to negotiate with the Alliance, and prefers a diplomatic resolution. As support for federal ideas grows, proponents have been increasingly willing to distance themselves from the AFA, calling it weak and apologist. Notably, while the AFA movement counts many of Antares' Vasudan population among its ranks, the AF movement is almost exclusively Terran. Allied representatives in Antares are to tread carefully around the Antares Federation movement. Any actions which could be perceived as persecution could inflame the situation or draw undecided Antarians to the movement. For the same reason, the Alliance is reluctant to outlaw the movement, at least until such a time as the anti-GTA violence can be positively traced to them. We already read the Antares Federation, the Hammer of Light, the Light and New Alliance, and the Second Dawn Society, Galactic Terran Intelligence, Regulus Syndicate. So now we go to the events. The Unification War. The Unification War was a conflict throughout Sol and Delta Serpentis in the 22nd century. The invention of jump drives led to vastly increased contact between Earth, Mars, and Jupiter, dragging previously buried tensions into the forefront of public consciousness. The discovery of the jump node to Delta Serpentis only inflamed them further. The dominance of corporate interests in early spaceflight meant that the conflict between naval ships was extremely rare. Instead, nations focused on commerce raiding, with massive civilian death tolls and general unrest quickly following. Many of the common elements of today's environment were first established during the early Unification War, such as the proliferation of armed cargo haulers and reliance on private security. By some counts, the Unification War had as many as 14 distinct belligerents, including planetary governments, mutual defense compacts among the Jovian system and the asteroid belt, pirate groups with no larger allegiance, and two independence movements, a short-lived one on Earth's moon and another which laid claim to Delta Serpentis. The now well-known phenomenon of node shifts was discovered during the war, when a cruiser group out of Delta Serpentis returning to Sol found itself arriving not in Neptunian orbit as expected, but within range of Earth's orbital artillery. In the end, human lives proved to be the most important resource. Put simply, Earth could shrug off what other powers would consider devastating defeats as acceptable losses. The surrender of Mars to Earth paved the way for the war's end, but victory was not without cost. Earth's private sector economic activity had all but collapsed, and damage to the planet's biosphere rivaled the 21st century plutocratic period. Martian terraforming had been set back almost a century by debris impacts. The Jovian government had been all but overwhelmed by pirates and converted belt mining ships, and humanity withdrew to lick its wounds. The Galactic Terran Alliance emerged from the ashes. The name was aspirational, galactic, meaning a focus on exploration, not warfare. Terran, a new identity in rejection of those which had brought the war about. Alliance, emphasizing mutual assistance and cooperation. Each of the major powers was given a new role. Earth would be the Alliance's capital, handling administrative matters and hosting delegates from across Terran space. The seat of the Admiralty moved, fittingly, to Mars, with Martian corporations given favorable treatment in Navy contracts. Jupiter became the industrial capital, exploiting the planet's vast quantities of economically useful gases to drive a new era in orbital construction. As before, the belt would supply raw materials, but would do so as an equal partner with full representation in the General Assembly. As for Delta Serpentis, it would represent what it always had, a gateway to the rest of the galaxy and the future. The 14 Years' War. To say that first contact with the parliamentary Vasudan Empire did not go smoothly would be an understatement. The specific cause of the war was unknown at the time, but has become well understood since the ceasefire. Prior to first contact, Vasudan explorers had entered the Antares system and flagged it as viable for colonization. However, Vasudan expansion focused on thoroughness over speed, and almost a decade passed before the Imperium returned. In the meantime, Terran colonists had set up shop. Without a common language or even reference point, representatives of both species were forced to rely on crude approximations. The Terran designation came away with the impression that Antares was being annexed, a reasonable fear given the powerful turrets visible on the Vasudan ships. While the Vasudans believed the Terran colony was preparing to enter the nearby Vasuda system by force, a perspective reinforced by a powerful fundamentalist group with ties to the military-industrial complex. The 14 Years' War was highly asymmetric. The Vasudan focus on slow, methodical expansion gave the Vasudan Navy a significant technological edge, but the Alliance Navy had learned plenty of tricks from the Unification War. Old starfighters, reactivated and retrofitted with modern systems, gave the Alliance a tactical edge. The Imperium's first attempt, the Anubis fighter, was outclassed by even the ancient Terran Shrike, and flown by a greenfield pilot corps with no experience to draw upon. So the Vasudans actually weren't using fighters at the start of the 14 Years' War. That is interesting. The Imperium's advantage lay in its warships. The Alliance had operated under the assumption that the flexibility of subspace-capable strike craft rendered heavier vessels obsolete, maintaining only a small number of gunships for fire support. The loss of entire squadrons attacking Vasudan freighters, let alone proper cruisers, really? Ottens, really? Showed just how mistaken this belief was. In time, both sides copied each other's technology, and the war ground on for 14 years. While intermittent ceasefires had been negotiated, none would last more than a month, until the arrival of the Shivans forced the issue. Old animosities were burned away under the threat of existential threat. It is telling that neither the emergence of the Hammer of Light nor the anti-Vasudan rhetoric of the Hades Rebellion was sufficient to reignite hostilities. Still, peace is a fragile thing, and all Allied personnel are under strict orders to maintain proper behavior in all interactions with Imperial citizens. The Shivan Incursion. The Shivan Incursion began in January of 2335 with the attack on Riviera Station in Ross 128. Early combat with the Shivans revealed them to possess extremely advanced technology, including fighter-scale shields and stealth systems which made them all but impervious to conventional attack. The Galactic Terran Alliance and Parliamentary Vasudan Empire set aside their differences to combat this new threat. Early operations centered on the capture of Shivan technology to even the odds. In an unprecedented show of trust, when the Alliance's new Avenger cannon was found to be effective against shield systems, it was made available to Imperial forces. An ironic development given how hard the Alliance had worked to keep the design out of Vasudan hands. The capture of Shivan shield systems allowed the Allied and Imperial fighters to mount their own versions of the technology, and Shivan sensors proved effective at penetrating their stealth. Every currently active fighter and bomber in both navies includes replicas of the original Shivan components. The success, however narrow, of these early operations led the Alliance to attempt the capture of a Shivan cruiser, the Terrans. While the Terrans was being studied at Tombaugh Station in the Ribos system, the Shivan warship Lucifer made its first appearance. Well, second, but there were no survivors from Ross 128. Destroying the station, its attending ships, and even the Terranus itself before rampaging throughout the system. The Lucifer proved a particularly thorny problem due to its unique shield system. Shivan fighter shields provide very efficient protection from small arms fire, but the Lucifer's shields proved completely impenetrable to all known weapons. Every engagement with the Lucifer ended in retreat, and attempts to cut its supply lines proved ineffective. After the Battle of Deneb, the Lucifer and its battle group were able to enter the Vasuda system virtually unopposed. The destruction of Vasuda Prime was a tragedy on a cosmic scale. Even at the darkest points of the Unification War, orbital bombardment had been regarded as beyond the pale. Even so, the battle had a silver lining. Vasudan refugees fled Shivan forces into the Antares system, where they discovered relics of a previously unknown species. A mystic among the expedition team recognized a sacred writing system from Vasudan myth and created a rough translation, lending considerable credibility to stories of alien influence on early Vasudan society. The artifacts describe the destruction of an alien empire to Shivan forces, culminating in an unsuccessful last stand at their homeworld. With military victory or even long-term survival off the table, the few survivors dedicated themselves to forming a new legacy, providing technology to track the Lucifer through subspace, where shield systems did not function. Terran and Vasudan scientists alike descended on Altair to reverse engineer the technology, giving rise to subspace tracking, or SUTRAC, as a distinct field of study. The discovery was just in time. As Shivan forces entered Alpha Centauri from Vasuda, their advanced sensors did what the Vasudans could not, detect signs of life in Sol. The Lucifer set course, forcing its way through multiple systems. Oh, detected across interstellar distances. Ultimately, the GTD Bastion tried to intercept the Lucifer at the Sol jump node, but was outmaneuvered, leading to its bomber wings pursuing the Lucifer without support. The ancient technology did its job, and the Lucifer was brought down before it could arrive, at the cost of collapsing the Sol node itself, cutting human society in half. The Hades Rebellion. Galactic Terran intelligence expanded rapidly during the 14 Years' War, leaving it operating largely without effective oversight. To some within the organization, this was an opportunity. One of those people was General Andreas Ryback, whose responsibilities included internal security. As the 14 Years' War ground into its 4th year, Ryback came to see the Alliance as ineffectual, bloated, and in need of reform, with himself at its head, of course. Partnering with Admiral Marcus Glaive, commander of the GTD Repulse and GTI's Research and Development Branch, Ryback's nascent conspiracy put out feelers, discreetly reaching out to disaffected individuals, while INTSEC quietly looked the other way. They pursued a subtle strategy, playing on wartime fear and hatred, offering a chance to engage in unsanctioned operations, which would result in high Vasudan casualties at the cost of ignoring Alliance ethical guidelines. Alliance policy, they argued, was only dragging out the war and grinding away lives on both sides. Many came to agree, and with agreement came loyalty. The conspiracy was centered on R&D, which, somewhat counterintuitively, not only developed new technologies, but was the first to deploy them in the field. R&D's pilots and crews had extensive experience with experimental ships, and when the conspiracy began developing stealth recon fighters, nothing seemed unusual. The conspiracy's inner circle, however, understood that these ships were far from scouts, and were, in fact, an effective tool to disrupt Allied operations in preparation for a military coup. The Repulse would not be able to accomplish its objectives alone, and the conspiracy used every tool at its disposal to buy time, even disrupting Shivan cleanup operations to keep loyalist GTI units occupied. Finally, their ultimate weapon revealed itself. The Hades, a massive command carrier integrating Shivan systems, of which the most alarming were replicas of the Lucifer's main guns. No ship in the Allied or Imperial Navy could oppose the Hades. Plans for an overwhelming assault failed against the ship's Shivan drive systems, allowing it to outmaneuver and escape its attackers through subspace. Anything less would crumple against its beam cannons. It was as if the ghost of the Lucifer had awoken, and many lives, Terran and Vasudan both, were spent trying to hold it back. It was a Vasudan ship, the PVD Hope, which finally changed the equation. Disregarding orders to withdraw for repairs, the Hope jumped in to attack the Hades. Rather than engaging conventionally, it set a collision course for the Hades engine section. The impact destroyed the Hope and the skeleton crew on board, but left the Hades in a precarious state. It was able to withdraw to Deneb, but the strain of the intersystem jump caused its Shivan hybrid systems to give out, leaving it stranded. The second battle of Deneb ended with the wreck of the Hades crashing down Deneb 3. An automated system caused it to initiate re-entry procedures, but most of its technology was destroyed in the crash or intentionally scuttled by the crew. In recognition of the conspiracy's targeting of Vasudan positions and civilians, the survivors were given over to the Imperium for interrogation, where they remain to this day. And now we get into characters from Between the Ashes Slaves to Chaos. Ozymandias was the Hammer of Light commander. The rogue Vasudan admiral, styling himself Ozymandias, seemed to be a rising star in the Hammer of Light. Nothing is known about his personal life, and Vasudan intelligence was unaware of him prior to his first appearance in Deneb. What is known is that Ozymandias is a skilled strategist, well versed in clever, deceitful maneuvers, and that he is fully committed to the Hammer's terrorist agenda. Ozymandias commands the Typhon-class destroyer Cardinal. Commanded. Sensor readings of this ship do not match any previously known Typhon, suggesting it may have been built by the Hammer rather than captured from the PVN. Ozymandias' aggressive strategy has been compared to that of the GTA's Admiral Po, with an emphasis on high-impact actions designed to leave his opponents off guard. Following his entry into Antares, Ozymandias focused his attacks on civilian population centers, with Terran and Vasudan alike, in an attempt to force them onto the defensive. Admiral Po. Admiral Po is, now was, an unconventional and somewhat controversial officer, but even his critics commend his dedication and loyalty to the GTA. Hailing from a middle-class family with no military background, Po defied expectations by graduating from the academy at the top of his class. His valedictorian speech centered on his upbringing on Beta Aquila 4, the effects of crime and corruption on his friends and family, and his desire to help pave the way for a better future. Admiral Po has high standards for his crew, his pilots, and himself. He's comfortable making snap decisions and has repeatedly risked his flagship, the Intrepid, in key battles, jumping in to reinforce positions other admirals would have ceded. During the 14 Years' War, Po developed a worthy opponent reputation among Vasudan commanders. After the ceasefire, he was often appointed as the Alliance's representative in joint operations against the Shivans. Po's tendency for overwritten speeches and navel-gazing has been well known since his academy days. Instead, he earns the trust of his subordinates by running a tight ship and fighting alongside them. And finally, our old nemesis, Kalev Ehin. A former GTA Marine, Kalev Ehin soured on the Alliance after the ill-fated Marnath boarding early in the 14 Years' War. Since being discharged, Ehin returned to his home system of Antares, where he became a vocal critic of the GTA, although not a very well-known one, until the publication of his book, War-Torn and Without Choice. Ehin's harsh criticism was immediately popular with secessionist elements of Antares' populace, although it was also faced with criticism over its political statements and factual inaccuracies. There's the understatement of the century. Nevertheless, Ehin was invited to Gulnara Local News, a radical program on the Gulnara Holonet, as a political commentator. Ehin's rhetoric was a major factor in the rise of secessionist sentiment throughout Antares, and his image has been used in anti-GTA protests and other systems as well. Any Allied officer interacting with Ehin is to answer his points calmly and with a minimum of confrontation, so as to avoid giving him more ammunition for his screeds. Alright, and that is the intelligence tab of the tech room, in between the ashes, the growing silence, here on Paladin Gaming. This is Paladin Gaming signing off for a drink. God.